السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. أما بعد. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu one day was walking in the streets of Medina, and he was walking and he passed by another companion by the name of Hanzala radiallahu anhu. And Hanzala, Abu Bakr, when he saw him sitting in the streets of Medina, just in the alleyways of Medina, he noticed that he was extremely upset. Something was playing on his mind and he was extremely upset. So he went up to him and he said, showing some concern for his fellow brother, he said to him, "What's wrong, O Hanzala? What's upsetting you so much on this day?" And Hanzala radiallahu anhu replied, he said, "Nafaqa Hanzala. Hanzala has committed hypocrisy." It's not an easy or light statement for anyone to make, let alone a Muslim or a companion of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, "Nafaqa Hanzala. Hanzala has committed hypocrisy." Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu said to him, "Why, O Hanzala? What has made you commit hypocrisy?" So Hanzala replied and he said, "When we're in the company of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and when we hear him recite the Quran, and he reminds us of Allah, and he reminds us of death, and he reminds us of the day of judgment and the hereafter, and he reminds us of paradise and hellfire, our iman is so strong, and we feel so connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We feel that there's nothing else in this life that matters. But then we leave the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We go back to our families, we go back to our homes, we go back to our jobs and our businesses, and we become engaged in the life of this world. And when we become engaged in the life of this world, our iman begins to plummet, becomes weaker. We have other things that preoccupy our minds. And so we find that that attachment that we just felt, that connection that we just had, we've lost it, or it's become considerably weaker. And so because of this flip-flop state, these two states that I fear for myself, hypocrisy. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, when he heard this explanation, and Abu Bakr, as you all know, is the greatest companion of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When he heard this explanation, he said to Hanzala, "By Allah, I feel the way that you feel. I experience this just the way you experience it. So why don't we go to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and ask him about this?" So they went to find the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam saw them approaching, he could see from Hanzala that he was extremely upset. Something was upsetting him. So even before he came, whilst he was still approaching him, he said to him, "O Hanzala, what's wrong with you?" And Hanzala said, "O Messenger of Allah, nafaqa Hanzala. Hanzala has committed hypocrisy." So the Prophet ﷺ said to him, "Why, O Hanzala?" And so Hanzala went through that same explanation again. "O Messenger of Allah, when I'm with you, I hear you recite the Quran, you remind me of Allah and the day of judgment and the hereafter. I feel like there's nothing in this life that matters more. And I feel so connected to Allah. My iman is so strong. But as soon as I leave you and I go back to my daily routine, all of that disappears. It becomes considerably weaker. And so I fear for myself hypocrisy." So the Prophet ﷺ, from his mercy and his gentleness and his kindness, understanding the needs of his ummah, the Prophet ﷺ said, "By Allah, if you were to always be in that state of high iman that you experience when you're with me, then Allah would make the angels come down to the earth and they would shake your hands. They would greet you in your houses, and they would greet you in your beds, and they would greet you on your streets. But O Hanzala, sa'atun wa sa'a. There is a time for this and a time for that." This beautiful narration of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam beautifully describes the dilemma that most of us face. And it's not a new dilemma, it's not a new issue. It's not a sign that you're a bad Muslim if you feel this way. But as we see, even the greatest companions of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam felt exactly like this. And that is that sometimes we feel extremely strong in our iman. Perhaps in the month of Ramadan, when everyone's reciting Quran and you go to the mosque and you're praying Taraweeh with all of the Muslims. Perhaps for those of us that have been fortunate enough to go to Umrah or Hajj, Mecca and Medina, those beautiful places, and you experience a strong iman connection. You feel like iman boost has taken over, right? You feel so connected to Allah and the Quran and everything around you. and you feel like there's nothing more important. But as soon as you come back, or Ramadan finishes, or you come out of that situation and you go back to your daily routine, come back to university, you go back to work, you go back to your family, and all of these mundane, normal issues just take their normal place as they do in our lives, then no longer do you feel that way. And that's typical, right? It's normal that you won't feel the way that you feel in Mecca when you're in York, or that you won't feel the way that you're in Medina when you're in London, or any of those places, because they are different. They're different experiences for us. And so our religion, from the beauty of our religion, is that it is a religion which is comprehensive and balanced. The Prophet ﷺ understood this. And so he didn't say to Hanbala, yes, you're right, you're a hypocrite. Right? How can you not have strong iman all the time? Why don't you always worship Allah? Why don't you always have that connection to Allah and the Quran? And this is a misconception that unfortunately many of us as Muslims also have. That in order to be a good Muslim, you always have to have the strongest of iman. But that's not possible, nor is it human, nor is it even something achievable. And that's why Abu Bakr radiallahu anh feels low iman, and low iman for Abu Bakr is probably very high iman for everyone else. But even so, if he feels low iman, it shows that even he can experience those types of feelings, and he can go through those types of emotions. So the real question here isn't the fact that you're low in iman, that sometimes you find it difficult to pray. Maybe you wake up for fajr, maybe you give zakat if zakat is due on you. Maybe the month of Ramadan becomes burdensome for you. Maybe reciting the Quran on a daily basis is a challenge for you. That's not the real issue, because those are things that everyone faces. And if someone comes to you and says that they don't face that, then either they are an extremely special person, and you need to really connect to that individual, or they're just lying. It's just not telling you the truth. They're just trying to sugarcoat the way they are, because they don't want you to think that they're a bad person. But it's normal, because all of us go through that. So that's not the real problem or the real question. But what the real question is how do we strengthen our iman in those times of weakness? When we no longer feel that connection, when the month of Ramadan has finished, when inevitably you have to leave a place like Mecca or Medina and come back home. How do you strengthen your iman? The Prophet ﷺ gave us many ways, and I don't have the time, unfortunately, to go through all of them. But I want to mention to you another beautiful narration, another hadith, in which the Prophet ﷺ summarized 3 very practical ways that we can always strengthen our iman. And imagine if as you're going throughout life, you could give yourself that iman boost as and when you need it. As and when you need to make that reconnection to Allah Azza wa Jalla, or reconnect to the Quran, you know how to administer yourself. It's like a doctor, self-medicating, right? You know what's wrong with you, you know how to self-medicate. That is what the Prophet ﷺ taught us. The Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith, collected in Bukhari and Muslim and narrated by Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu, he said sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, ثَلَاثٌ مَنْ كُنَّ فِيهِ وَجَدَ بِهِنَّ حَلَاوَةَ الْإِيمَانِ. 3 things, if you find them, you achieve them, you master them, you will attain the sweetness of iman. You will taste the sweetness of iman. Now let's just pause and ponder over this statement. You will taste the sweetness of iman. That by default, by necessity, means that iman has sweetness to it. And if I was to ask you, and this is like a question for you to answer to yourselves in your minds, how many of us have actually tasted the sweetness of iman? In fact, how many of us even knew that there was such a thing as the sweetness of iman? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, when He describes this religion, and He describes Tawheed, and He describes iman, and He describes La ilaha illallah, He describes it to a tree. أَلَمْ تَرَ كَيْفَ ضَرَبَ اللَّهُ مَثَلًا كَلِمَةً طَيِّبَةً كَشَجَرَةٍ طَيِّبَةٍ. Allah sets forth for you the parable and the example of the goodly word. What is the good word? It is La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. The example of that word is like the example of a good tree. And what's one of the greatest benefits of a good tree? The good sweet fruit that it produces. The taste that you have when you crunch into that apple, or you pick that orange, or you take that banana. That is what a good tree gives to you. Nice sweet fruit. And so likewise, iman also has a sweetness. La ilaha illallah should allow you to taste that sweetness. And that is one of the biggest problems we face right there. the fact that we can't taste that sweetness. In fact, forget the sweetness, we don't even know where the tree is. Right? We can't even locate that tree. We don't even know, we forget the tree, we don't even know where the garden of the tree is. Right? Where's that orchard where we can go and find that tree and take that fruit? Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, famous scholar of the past, he said that Allah Azza wa Jal has a Jannah in the hereafter, as we all know. There is a garden of paradise in the hereafter. But in order for you to enter into that garden, you must first enter into the garden of this world. That is a very profound statement. Before you enter into the garden of Allah on the day of judgment in Jannah, you must enter into the garden of this world. What is the garden of this world? What is the Jannah of this world? That Jannah is tasting the sweetness of Iman. That is what that Jannah is. If you can achieve that in this world, then you will, inshaAllah, by the blessings of Allah and His mercy, achieve Jannah in the next life. Because Allah describes Jannah in many ways in the Quran. And He says, for example, that it is everlasting. For example, that the person that enters into it will never want anything else in exchange. Allah says, for example, that Jannah, its blessings are so perpetual and they keep renewing themselves that you will never become bored. You will never be anything other than satisfied by Jannah. So likewise, if that is the Jannah of the Akhirah, likewise by entering into the garden of this world, by tasting that sweetness of Iman, you'll never want to leave. You'll never want to leave that garden. Once you taste that sweetness of Iman, you'll never want it to go. And you will try everything you can in order to get it back. That is the beauty of this hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. 3 things which if you do, you will taste the sweetness of Iman. And if you want to see the proof and reality of this statement, you don't need to look any further than ourselves. And compare us to the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. For example, if I was to say to you now, and this is like obviously an absurd statement because I could never actually say this, but if I was for the sake of argument to say that you will enter into Jannah, guaranteed, doesn't matter what you do, you will enter into Jannah. If I was to give you that guarantee right here, right now, and it was a solid guarantee, right? None of those like, dodgy claims that you get, all those people calling you up, this is a solid guarantee that you will enter into Jannah. That is the guarantee that I give you right now. Ask yourself this question. How would your worship of Allah change after that guarantee? Would it increase and become better? Or would it be the opposite? Would you completely stop? And if you think about this, and I think if we're honest with ourselves, myself included, it would be that we just go for retirement, right? No more Fajr, no fasting in Ramadan, don't need to give money to like people anymore and pay for charity, none of that stuff, right? Nothing. We're on retirement, like we're just going on holiday, right? That's it. Everything. And the guarantee is you can do whatever you want and you will get into Jannah. So that basically means anything you want. Anything that was normally haram, khalas, it's halal. Do whatever you want. And anything that was obligatory on you is no longer obligatory. Do what you want. And I think most of us would take that approach, and that is a sign of our Iman. But what we fail to realize is that this guarantee was given to a number of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. They were given such a guarantee that they will enter into Jannah, irrespective of what they do. They will have Jannah. Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali, and many others. They were promised paradise by the Prophet ﷺ. And in a number of those statements, he actually said to them, doesn't matter what you do after today, you will enter into Jannah. Like the Prophet ﷺ said to Uthman radiallahu anhu, when he gave 1,000 camels in the way of Allah, he said, doesn't matter what Uthman does after today, he will enter into Jannah. That's like an open-ended statement. It's not like except, there's no buts or ifs. Whatever he does, he will enter into Jannah. Even after that point, he becomes the worst Muslim, he enters into Jannah. But then look at the lives of those people, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman and Ali, after the death of the Prophet ﷺ. Did they go on retirement? Did they go on holiday? And it was well earned, right? It's not just that they just want to go on holiday. They've spent 20 years of their lives sacrificing for this religion. Don't they deserve a break? Don't they deserve to go on retirement? Shouldn't they be allowed to pass this on to someone else? But instead, even after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, they increased in Iman. They would do even more. They would strive even more. They would worship Allah even more. And you would think it was impossible. How can you do that after the death of the Prophet ﷺ? Yet they did so, and they never stopped. Why? Because it wasn't the case of, it's a burden for me, it's an issue of halal or haram, or it's an issue of an obligation or a prohibition. It was what they found was they tasted the sweetness of Iman. And once they tasted that sweetness of Iman, didn't matter what everyone else wanted, didn't want, whether they had to, didn't have to, they wanted that taste. And they wanted to preserve that taste. And they wanted to keep tasting it because it was so delicious to them. And that's why they continued to worship Allah the way that they did. And it's amazing when you read their lives, like you think, subhanAllah, were these people even human? Right? You think like maybe they're angels or something because of the way they were. After the death of the Prophet ﷺ, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu would recite the Quran in prayer. And he'd have hundreds of people behind him, praying behind him. And they would say that he would cry so much. He would cry so much from his recitation of the Quran that the people behind him couldn't understand what he was saying. Weren't able to decipher the words of the verses of the Quran because of how much he would cry. When Umar radiallahu anhu would lead the companions in prayer, he would cry so much that the people behind him would cry because of his crying. They just cried because they weren't moved in that same way, but because of the way that he cried, the emotions that they had listening to that crying, it would make them cry. Look at the beauty of the way that they worshipped Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And these were people that were guaranteed Jannah. And that's why this tasting the sweetness of Iman is not just another statement. It's not just something which I want you to just listen to and which like goes in one ear, comes out the other ear. I want you to try and experience this. I want you to try to go back to the best of your ability, asking Allah for His help, making dua to Allah that He gives you the tawfiq and the ability and the blessings to be able to do this. And I want you to try just once and see if you can find that taste of Iman. And if you sincerely try, Allah will help you. And once you find that sweetness of Iman and you taste it, honestly, I promise that you will never want to go back. You will never look back. Because that's how beautiful it is. It's like someone saying that once you go into Jannah, you can leave. They will never want to leave. So it's like a no-brainer. It's not even a question that's worth asking. Once they enter, they will never want to leave. خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا لَا يَبْغُونَ عَنْهَا حِوَلًا. They will live therein forever. Never will they want anything else in exchange. So our Prophet ﷺ gave us three very practical ways. The first, he said that Allah and His Messenger are more beloved to you than everything else. Allah and His Messenger are more beloved to you than everything else. That is a simple statement yet again. But its meaning is so comprehensive and so profound that to implement it in your lives is a very difficult stroke. That Allah and His Messenger are more beloved to you than everything else. We know, for example, that the Prophet ﷺ said, the famous hadith, none of you truly believes until I am more beloved to him than his parents and his children and all of the people. And we know the story of Umar radiallahu anhu when he came to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, O Messenger of Allah, you are more beloved to me, you are more beloved to me than everyone else with the exception of myself. What did the Prophet ﷺ say? Not yet, O Umar. What's not yet? What's you still waiting for? Not yet, meaning that you haven't yet completed Iman. You haven't reached the perfection of Iman. So then Umar radiallahu anhu, he reflected on himself. And he realized that he sacrificed so much for the Prophet ﷺ. He was willing to sacrifice his life. And he sacrificed his wealth. And he would put himself in harm's way to ensure that not a single drop of blood would leave the body of the Prophet ﷺ. So after reflecting on that, he said, no, O Messenger of Allah, I have realized that you are more beloved to me than everyone, including myself. So what did the Prophet ﷺ say? Al-ana ya Umar. Now, O Umar, you have reached that status of Iman. So what does that mean? To love Allah and His Messenger more than everything else. It means that you learn about their religion. You study the Quran. You study the life and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. You read it, you learn about it, you study it, and then you implement it in your lives and you submit to it. And you fight off those desires that go against it. That is basically in a nutshell. But it's very, very difficult to do. Because often what we find in the Quran and Sunnah, often what Allah tells us to do and the Prophet ﷺ ordered us to do, is something which conflicts with many of our desires, many of our natural inclinations. Because our natural inclination is to sleep in the morning and not wake up for Fajr. Our natural inclination is to keep the money we have in our pockets, and not to give it to other people. Our natural inclination is not to starve ourselves for 18 hours a day. It is to eat and drink. But to put Allah and His Messenger before everything else shows that submission, shows that faith, shows that hope that you have in Allah, the trust that you have in Allah, the certainty that you have in the promise of Allah. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ was once visiting a graveyard, and he was with a number of his companions. And after he visited the graveyard and he gave salams to the deceased Muslims there, he said out loud, he said, I long to meet my brothers. I long to meet my brothers and sisters. So the companions were amazed, perplexed by this statement. They said, O Messenger of Allah, are we not your brothers? Standing right here. Right? What do you longing to meet us? We're already here. So he said, no. He said, you are my companions. You're not my brothers, you are my companions. My brothers are those people who will come after me. They never saw me, yet they will still have faith in me and they will follow me. SubhanAllah. That is what it means to be a brother of the Prophet ﷺ. We went there, we never lived with the Prophet ﷺ, never sat with him, never spoke to him, don't know what he looks like, don't know anything about him in terms of like first-hand information. All we have from books and other sources. That's it. Yet still we believe in him. We have faith in him that he was the messenger of Allah, that Allah sent him with the Quran, and so on and so forth. And that iman then dictates, that belief in him dictates that we follow him and we place him above everything else. Even if it means going against our desires. Even if it means that other people around us will look down on us. Even if it means that they'll criticize us. Even if it means that when you walk down the street, people will give you funny looks. Or they'll shout abuse at you. That's what it means. Because the Prophet ﷺ then continued in the hadith. And he said, my brothers are those people who have never met me, never saw me, yet they will have faith in me and they will follow me. He said, for one of them to hold on to this religion would be like holding on to red hot coals. That's how difficult it will be to worship Allah, to come close to Allah, to follow the example of the Prophet ﷺ. Imagine taking a red hot coal and holding it in your hand. And despite all of your natural inclinations to let it go, throw it away, run away, you keep it in the palm of your hand. Because you know, that's what it takes. The Prophet ﷺ continued and he said, for one of those people, meaning those people who hold on to this religion like red hot coals, for one of them is the reward of 70. They said, O Messenger of Allah, do you mean 70 from amongst them or 70 from amongst us, meaning the companions? He said, no, rather 70 from amongst you. Imagine the reward of 70 companions of the Prophet ﷺ. And it's a general hadith. It didn't stipulate, it didn't say, Abu Bakr or Umar or Uthman. It could be any one of them. Imagine 70 times the reward of one of them. And that's because the faith that you need to follow the Prophet ﷺ after his death, it is much more difficult. Because during his life, you'd see his miracles. You'd know that the Quran was being revealed to him. You'd speak to him and he would give you that strength that you need in your iman. You would have him as a real life role model. Imagine like if you had a question about any issue of your religion. Don't need to go to Google, you don't need to go and listen to a book, you don't need to go and ask someone. The Prophet ﷺ is your mufti. He's the person you ask. If you want to go and pray, it's not Sudais leading in the Haram as nice as he is, and Shuraim and all of these reciters, it is the Prophet ﷺ leading the prayer. You want to go and listen to the Friday khutbah, and you're wondering like it's going to be in Urdu or English or Somali, it's the Prophet ﷺ giving the khutbah. That's what those companions had. So in a way, Allah Azza wa Jal gave him a great blessing, and that's why they have such a special status in our religion, because they lived and saw him and they saw that time. But for us, it is more difficult, because we don't have anyone to hold us and say, I'm getting revelation from Allah concerning this issue. We have to go and put in a lot of effort to go to the Quran and the Sunnah and derive those rulings and understand them and then apply and implement them. And so the reward is great. Allah Azza wa Jal knows this. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ said that when Allah first created paradise and the hellfire, He created them. He told Jibreel alayhi salam to go and look at the two. And when Jibreel came back, and I'm summarizing the hadith, but when Jibreel came back, he said to Allah that I don't think anyone will hear about Jannah except that they will enter into it. And I don't think anyone will hear about the hellfire except that they will flee from it and run away. So then Allah Azza wa Jal placed hardships around Jannah. And He placed ease and comfort and luxury around the hellfire. And then He said to Jibreel, now go back and look at it. And so he went and he looked at the two. And he came back and he said, oh Allah, I fear that hardly anyone will enter into Jannah. And oh Allah, I fear that everyone will fall into the fire. That is the hardship. When you wake up for Fajr in the morning, when you make wudu with cold water, and the heating's not on yet, or the pipes haven't started working in your house. I don't know in York you have like very old houses. Those problems that you face on a daily basis, that is a struggle that you face. But that is one of those things that will bring you closer to that Jannah. And that's what it means to love Allah and the Prophet ﷺ more than anything else. That was what was so special about the companions, that they would sacrifice everything for the Prophet ﷺ. They wouldn't ever question him. They wouldn't stand up and say, but why? But if? But only? But maybe? No, they would just accept what he said. Because they knew that that was a part of the faith that they had in him. And that's why when the Prophet ﷺ went on that miraculous night journey, from Mecca to Jerusalem, then to the heavens and back, what did the non-Muslims do? What did the Quraysh, the pagan Arabs do? The first person that they went to was Abu Bakr. Because they thought, how is it, this guy's crazy. He's claiming to go in a single night from Mecca to Jerusalem, which in that time would take a month. Not only that, but then he went to the heavens, came back, went all the way home to Mecca, and was asleep in his bed. So they went to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu and they said, have you heard what your companion is saying? Meaning the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And Abu Bakr hadn't heard this story. It was early in the morning, he hadn't yet met the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam or heard this incident from his lips. So they went and told him what he was saying. And they said, how can you believe such a man? What did Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu say? Did he say, let me go and check the facts? Let me go and verify, maybe you misheard, or maybe you misspoke, maybe he woke up, he was feeling a bit tired, didn't know what he was saying? He said, no. He said, by Allah, if he said that, then I believe him. He said, how can you believe such a thing? He said, I believe that every day revelation comes to him directly from the heavens. So why wouldn't I believe him about a single trip in his lifetime? That is the iman that these companions had. That is how they sacrificed everything for Allah and for the Prophet ﷺ. And it is that sacrifice, this is the first way to taste the sweetness of iman. That sacrifice that is within putting Allah and His Prophet ﷺ before everything else. The second thing that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that will allow you to taste the sweetness of iman. He said that you have someone that you love for the sake of Allah. That you have someone that you love only for the sake of Allah. And really, honestly, we already have this relationship. What relationship is the Prophet ﷺ speaking about? He's speaking about friendship. That's what he's speaking about. And everyone has friends, I hope. Everyone has friends. And most of us are probably sitting with them right now. To your right or to your left are probably people that you would call your friends. Everyone has this relationship. It's one of the first relationships that we develop. When we're little young children, we have our family, we have our brothers and sisters and so on. But one of the first external relationships that a child will make is friends. They'll go out, before their business acquaintances and business partners, all of those other things, they will have friends. Maybe it's their cousins, maybe it's, for example, the children of their neighbors, maybe they'll go to nursery and make some friends. One of the first relationships that we have. What does the Prophet ﷺ say? One of the ways that you taste the sweetness of iman is that you make sure that that friendship is for the sake of Allah. It's not because you need money. It's not because you want to, like, for example, get married to someone in the family. It's not because of any of those reasons. It is for Allah and Allah alone. And that is the mistake that we make. Most of the friends that we have just became our friends. And that relationship was because they happened to be in our class or in our course. Or maybe they grew up in our neighborhood. Or maybe my parents know their parents. That's the way we make friendships. That's how these relationships are formed for the vast majority of us. It's a very organic way. But the Prophet ﷺ is saying that you need, that's okay, you can have those types of friends, but you also need that special group of people around you. That you only have that friendship for the sake of Allah. Because when you have that friendship for the sake of Allah, then those people will ensure by the permission of Allah, that your iman is always strong. They're the types of friends. When you go out and you're having a nice time, when the time for prayer comes, they'll remind you. They'll say, let us take out 10 minutes and go and pray. They're the kind of people who in the month of Ramadan, where you might be busy doing A, B, C, and D, they'll say to you, why don't we just take out 30 minutes today just to recite some extra Quran? When they hear of some very good cause, they will say, why don't we give a bit extra in charity? If you're thinking of giving £5, why don't we give 10? And they will always encourage you, always look out for you, and they won't be ashamed. They won't be scared. They won't be afraid of reminding you of Allah when you need to be reminded. So if you're laxing in your prayers, or you're not doing something that you should be doing as a Muslim, then they won't be shy. They won't feel that their friendship will be ruined if they bring this up to you. So they will mention it to you. Not why? Because what's more important to them is that Allah loves you. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ mentioned to us the hadith of a man who was leaving a village and he was going to another village to visit a friend. So Allah sent to him an angel in the form of a man. And the angel came and he said to that man from the village, where are you going? And he said, I'm going to such and such a village. He said to him, why are you going? Is it because you have some money issues? Maybe you need some money or you need to get some loan repaid? He said, no, not because of money. He said, is it because of marriage? Maybe you want to marry someone there, or he wants to marry someone from your village. He said, no. He said, perhaps it's for some other reason from the dunya. The man said, no. So the angel asked him, then why? He said, only for the sake of Allah. Only because I love that person for the sake of Allah. So the angel said, I am an angel that your Lord has sent down to you. I know that just as you love your friend for the sake of Allah, that Allah also loves you. How amazing is that? We already have these friendships. All we have to do is treat them. The Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith of Mu'adh radiallahu anhu, that Allah says in the hadith of Qudsi, 4 types of people, Allah's love is obligatory upon them. Allah will love them. It is obligatory upon Allah that He loves 4 types of people. The Prophet ﷺ said, those who love one another for the sake of Allah, and those who sit with one another for the sake of Allah, and those who visit one another for the sake of Allah, and those who strive for one another for the sake of Allah. That's exactly what friends do. They love one another, they support one another, they trust one another, they visit one another, they sit with one another, and they strive for one another. But what's the common denominator? What makes it go from a normal friendship to the friendship that Allah is speaking about? It is for the sake of Allah. It is for Allah's sake. And that's why Allah Azza wa Jalla in the Quran, He says, Al-akhillahu yawma'idhin ba'duhum li ba'din aduwwun illa al-muttaqin. The best of friends on the day of judgment will be enemies one to another except for the pious and the righteous. How can a best friend become your enemy on the day of judgment? That person that you trust the most, you probably speak to them more than you probably speak to some of your own family members. Normally we confide in these people before we even confide in our parents. Normally they're the first people that we speak to in the day and the last people that we speak to at night. This is how close we are to these people. But on Yawm al-Qiyamah they will be our enemies and we will be theirs. How? Because on Yawm al-Qiyamah we will say it was our friend that delayed us from going to the prayer. It was our friend that didn't remind us that we need to recite some more Quran. It was our friend who instead of making me give the money to charity, he told me to go and spend it on something else. Or she did. And so we will blame one another. Except for the muttaqeen. Except for the people of piety and righteousness whose friendship was already based on that solid platform. On Yawm al-Qiyamah, they will reap the benefits of that friendship. This is an extremely important point. Look at the friends that you have around you. Not only the way that they are friends to you, but the way that you are friends to them as well. Ask yourself this question. How have you benefited your friends in front of Allah? Look at the example of Abu Bakr and Umar radiallahu anhuma. They were 2 extremely close friends, the best of friends. And you find by studying their lives that whatever else that took place in their life, they would always support one another. They're always constantly with one another. They're always striving with one another. And they're always competing with one another for the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're always in competition. And that's why everyone knows the famous story in the Battle of Tabuk, when Umar radiallahu anhu was wealthy at that time. So he came to give some charity to the Prophet ﷺ, and he gave half of his wealth, thinking that no one amongst the Muslims today will better me. Half of my wealth, who's going to give half of everything they own? But then Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu came with everything that he had. And when the Prophet ﷺ said to him, who have you left behind for yourself and your family? What have you left behind? What did he say? He said, I left for them Allah and His Messenger. Look at the way he combined between the first 2 points of Iman. Number one, putting everything, Allah and His Messenger, before everything else. Gave everything for the sake of Allah. I left for them Allah and His Messenger. And the second point, look at that friendship and rivalry. And it wasn't one of jealousy, like Umar didn't go and sulk for the rest of the day and say, Abu Bakr, I'm never going to speak to you again. Like this was my only chance and you took it from me. No, it was a friendship based upon love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so he was happy that his brother did better than him. And that's why Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu during his khilafah, there's a beautiful story. When Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu once came to the masjid for Fajr, and he led the Muslims in prayer. And after the Fajr prayer, he went in a different direction other than the way that he normally takes to go home. Went to a different part of Medina. Umar radiallahu anhu saw him doing so. Saw him taking a different road. And so he was curious, where is Abu Bakr going at such an early hour in the morning? And so he followed him. And he followed him to the outskirts of Medina. And Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu stopped at a mud hut. And he entered into that hut. And he stayed there for some time, and then he left and went home. And Umar radiallahu anhu was just sitting there watching and waiting. And he wants to know what's Abu Bakr doing so that I can go and do the same thing. I can compete with Abu Bakr. I can be like Abu Bakr. So he goes and he knocks on the door. And he enters and he finds an old blind woman. Old blind woman. So he says to her, who are you and what are you doing here? And who is that man who came and what did he want from you? And so the old woman said, I'm an old blind woman. I have no father, no brother, no son, no one to look after me. And I've become so old that I've lost my eyesight. I've become blind. As for this man who comes every single day, I don't know who he is. No idea. But every day he comes to my house in the morning. And he cleans my house. And he milks my goats. And he makes my bread. And he fixes all of the affairs of my house. And then he leaves. And until this day, I don't know who he is. Umar radiallahu anhu left that house in tears, crying. And he said, أَتْعَبْتَ الْخُلَفَاءَ مِنْ بَعْدِكَ يَا أَبَا بَكْرٍ. Anyone who becomes a Khalifa after Abu Bakr will never be able to live up to his standards. Never. Look how easy it would have been for Abu Bakr one day to stand in the masjid and say, there's an old blind woman in the outskirts of Medina. Someone go and help her. Someone go and make her some food. Someone go and fix her shoes or whatever she needed. Go and help her. How many of the companions would have rushed to go and help that old woman? But Abu Bakr, even though he's the Khalifa, he's the most important person in that society. There's so many issues to deal with. He would go and he would do it himself. Because that's tasting the sweetness of Iman. And Umar radiallahu anhu would go and do it himself. Because he has that friend that's always his role model. He's always looking up to him. He's always trying to strive with him for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The third point that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned in that hadith that will allow you to taste the sweetness of Iman is that you dislike to leave this religion just as you dislike to be thrown in the fire. That you dislike to leave this religion just as you dislike to be thrown into the fire of hell. This is basically an issue of holding yourself to account. We need to look at ourselves and assess our lives. If we were to die today, how confident are you that Allah would shower you with His mercy? That Allah would enter you into Jannah today based upon what you've done so far? How confident are you that you have done enough to attain the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Or is it the opposite? Are you completely unconfident? You have no confidence in this. And the likelihood is that Allah would punish you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, every day that you wake up and every day that you live, He gives you a chance. Gives you a chance to increase in worship. Gives you a chance to strengthen your iman. Gives you a chance to do some good, to benefit those people around you. He gives you a chance to make tawbah, to repent, to seek forgiveness from Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. He gives you a chance every single day that you wake up. How many chances have you missed? How many chances have you squandered? And how many more chances do you have left? And the reality is that we don't know. There's a common visioning exercise that people normally do. And I don't know if you've come across this before, but what they normally say is, for example, assess your life. What you do at home, what you do at work, everything, your whole life. Now imagine someone was to say to you that tonight you will die. This is it. Your last night on earth. Tonight you will die. So they gave you the guarantee of Jannah. This is like one of those other false guarantees, which no one can prove, but for the sake of argument. And it's a possibility that tonight is the last night of your life. What would you go and change? What would you do? What would be different on this night? Well, how would you change your plans tonight? From what you already had planned in your mind for the rest of this evening once I leave. What would you change knowing the reality of your life is coming to an end? This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam want us to assess every single day of our lives. Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, the famous companion, would say, every day that passes by, a part of your life passes with it. A bit of you leaves with it. Because that time will never come back to you. You'll never get that chance again. You can't rewind the clock, and we all know that. We all know, for example, you just have to look at when you were in primary school. How many of you remember when you were in primary school? Everyone remembers. And it's like it was yesterday. Don't people always say that? It was like it was yesterday. But that means that the time has gone by so quick and we haven't really used it. Didn't really utilize it the way that we wanted. And often people say, if I could turn back the clock, then I would do this and this, and I would change this and this. But the reality is you can't, so there's no point thinking about silly stuff like that. If you waste all your time thinking about how you'd rewind the clock, that's like crazy, because then you'd lose the rest of your life worrying about rewinding that clock. But you still have a chance. Allah has still given you that chance. That you dislike to leave this religion just as you dislike to be thrown into the fire of hell. On Yawm al-Qiyamah, the Prophet ﷺ was asked by his companions, where can we meet you? Where will you be? Where can we come and see you? And so the Prophet ﷺ said, I will be at my pond. I will be at my home. And I will conclude, inshallah, with this story. I will be at my pond, at my home. And we know from the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ that the water of this pond will come from this river Al-Kawthar in Jannah. That water will come from that river in Jannah, this river called Al-Kawthar, and the water will come out to this pond which is outside of Jannah. And the Prophet ﷺ will be standing there serving people himself with his own hand. Imagine that. The Prophet ﷺ serving you. How much would you have given? What would you have sacrificed? How much would you have spent just to serve him once? A single cup of water. Just to see him once. Just to shake his hand once. Just to say Assalamu alaikum to him once. But on Yawm al-Qiyamah, from the honor that the Prophet ﷺ will give to his followers is that he will serve them. He will stand and he will serve them. And he will serve them with golden cups of the water of his pond. And the Prophet ﷺ described that water and he said, it is whiter than milk, sweeter than honey, more fragrant than musk. Whosoever drinks from it will never be thirsty again. That's how amazing that water is. The Prophet ﷺ said though, as he's standing there by his pond, waiting and welcoming his followers and his ummah, there will be a group of people from this ummah, meaning Muslims, a group of people from this ummah, who will be coming close towards his pond. But just as they come close, the angels will come and they will drive them away. Push them back and drive them away. So the Prophet ﷺ, out of his mercy, his kindness, his gentleness for his ummah, he will say, Ummati, Ummati. These are people from my ummah, they are people from my ummah. Let them come, let them drink. But the angels will say, you don't know what they did to your religion after you died. That's what they'll say. You don't know what happened to your religion, what they did to your religion after you died. The way they misinterpreted it. The way that they wouldn't choose what to follow and what not to follow. The way that they would just pick and choose elements that suited them. You don't know what they did to your religion after you. And imagine on that day, like coming after years of longing and waiting just to see the Prophet ﷺ once. You finally see him in the horizon. And it's not just any type of meeting. He's going to serve you with this water that will make you experience no thirst ever again. And just as you come close, the angels come and they push you away. And they say about you that you changed his religion after he died. What does the Prophet ﷺ say in response to the angels? He says, Suhqan, suhqan liman baddala ba'di. Take them away from me. Remove them from me. Distance them from me. Those people who changed my religion after me. He will free himself from those people. Imagine how much grief and sadness and loss you'd feel on that day, being one of those people. That instead of putting the Prophet ﷺ first, instead of putting Allah first, instead of putting the Quran first, we chose to pick and choose elements of our religion. We chose to just change the religion to when it suited us. We chose to not follow their example, to not sacrifice for them. So on that day, they will make no sacrifice for us as well. They will free themselves from us. Just as in our lives, even though we don't do this explicitly, we don't say it, but our actions say, and they speak volumes for us, that we are distancing ourselves from them, from their sunnah, from their way, from their teachings, through the way that we talk, the way that we act, the way that we deal with other people. When we don't follow the guidelines of Allah and His Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so likewise the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam will distance himself from those people. My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, these are three very simple things that are easily in the grasp of every single person sitting here today. And I could have come in today and said, like from the ways that you strengthen your iman is that you memorize the Quran. And that is a way. But it's very difficult for most people to do that. And that's the reality. It's sad, but it's the reality. I could have come in and said, one of the ways that you strengthen your iman is you make umrah every month. Go every month and make umrah. And that would really strengthen your iman. But again, it's impractical for us. So instead I chose to give you three things that are in the grasp of all of you. And some of you, in fact everyone, has started on all of these three things to a certain way. It's just that we found obstacles in the way. Shaitan's come and he's placed these different obstacles in our path in all of these three things. In sacrificing for Allah and the Prophet ﷺ, in having friendship for the sake of Allah, in following the religion of Allah and not wanting to leave that religion. But Shaitan comes and he whispers and he places these obstacles. And some of us, we fall back because of these obstacles. Others are still stuck. They don't know which way to go. They don't know how to get around the boulder. They don't know how to get over the obstacle. And so they're stuck. And so it's not difficult. What it takes though is self-discipline. It takes determination. It takes you really wanting to taste that sweetness of iman. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ, when you look throughout his life, when you look at how much he nurtured his companions, look at the way he educated them, you will never, hardly ever, if ever, find a single hadith that speaks about military strategy. Find me a single hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ said, this is the best battle formation. This is the way that you line up your archers. This is the type of weaponry that you should be looking to invent. Find me a single hadith in which you have any of those things. The Prophet ﷺ never focused so much on those issues. Maybe you have the odd hadith here in the battle, in the midst of the battle, he'll say go and set up the troops there or something. But other than that, in Medina, in all of the time in between those battles, there was no preparation. Yes, the companions were archers, they would ride horses, they would do so many things in preparation, but you won't find a concerted effort. There was no military school. There was no Sandhurst right at that time where they would learn this stuff. So instead, what did the Prophet ﷺ focus on? What did he spend 23 years teaching his companions? He spent teaching them how to taste the sweetness of iman. Because if you taste that sweetness of iman, everything else is easy. Everything else is easy. But if you can't taste that sweetness of iman, doesn't matter how scientifically advanced you are, doesn't matter how technologically advanced you are, doesn't matter about any of those things. Because at heart, and heart is what matters, at heart you're still very weak. You're still disconnected. You still have no attachment to anything. You can easily be bought off by the luxuries of this dunya. By money, by fame, by power, all of those things are temptations to you. So the Prophet ﷺ never focused on these issues. He would focus on the heart. Focus on what makes a person strong in iman. Focus on the ways that people can taste that sweetness of iman. Focus on the way people can attach themselves to Allah, how to worship Allah, how to connect with the Quran. That's what the life of our Prophet ﷺ teaches us. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by His most beautiful names and His most lofty attributes, that He gives us the ability to strengthen our iman. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes us from amongst those people. When Yawm al-Qiyamah will be resurrected with our Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And he will be given the shade of Allah. And he will be allowed to meet the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and drink from his palm. And he will be entered into his Jannah. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He strengthens our iman, enables us to sacrifice for Allah and His Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that we put them before everything else, that we have friends that we have for the sake of Allah and Allah alone, and that we dislike to leave this religion just as we dislike to be entered into the hellfire. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He enters us all into Jannah al-Firdaus al-A'la. I'd like to thank the brothers and the sisters of this ISAP who very graciously invited me here to York, even though it's a very far and distant way from Birmingham. But I'm very happy to be here with you. جزاكم الله خير. صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.